Yes.
So positive thinking. Positive.
Oh, it.
Hey gang, it's Mark here. Now, before we dive into today's super juicy conversation, I want to let you know two things. Number one, if you want to launch your own podcast, come and join me on the 20th of September, where I'm going to be teaching you everything I've learned over the last 4 years of growing the Unconventionalists podcast so that you can plan, launch and grow your very own show from scratch. You also get 10% by using the discount code Podcast Tribe, all in lower caps. That's Podcast Tribe to get 10%. Tickets are all linked below the show notes. Now, number two, I want to let you know, and this is why I recorded this. Danielle told me after our episode that she was excited because she was launching a brand new podcast. And I told her we should have talked about it and we didn't have time. And so I want to let you know now that on the 25th of August 2019, Danielle launched her brand new podcast. It's going to be an absolute bomb. So go and check it out. If you enjoyed today's conversation, if you're inspired by it in any kind of way, go and leave a rating and review. I'm sure she'll super appreciate it. I've got a little story I want to tell you about Danielle, so stay tuned. I'll tell you at the end of the episode. Until then, enjoy today's conversation. Hi folks, welcome back to the Unconventionalist podcast. I'm your host, Mark Leruste, and this is the show about what it's really like to turn your message into a movement. I am more than honored to introduce today's guest, a very special guest who's come all the way from Canada today in rainy London, and we're going to have lots of hopefully juicy stuff to talk about. She is, of course, Danielle LaPorte, who is an author of a buffet of juicy books, may I say so, all the way from, and I've actually got them so I could show them to you, which I'm very excited about. One of the first books, which I believe she published, you might be able to correct me, The Firestarter Session, all about redefining what success means to you, having that big old question of, do you know what success means to you? And then, of course, there is the epic Desire Map that came out 5 years ago, which I'm really excited to talk about because it's making a resurgence, all about how to create goals with soul and becoming an intentional way of feeling. And then there was a White Hot Truth, which was also about how self-improvement can sometimes become a tool for self-criticism. So much juicy stuff I want to talk about. Super Soul 100 from Oprah, voted, I think, by Forbes or some magazine about top 100 websites for women. But more than that, what I've actually learned from exploring and diving into the content with Danielle is that there's a real truth and there's a fun truth to that. It's a mix of spirituality and badassery, all equal in amounts and much more. So without further ado, Danielle, welcome to the show.
Thank you. You pronounced my name correctly. I love it.
Oh, yeah. Cool. So it's Danielle, right?
It's Danielle.
Danielle.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's with that E sound too,
yeah.
right? Den
cool.
instead of den.
Cool. And we're going to be eating the microphone all day long today.
Yes.
How are you feeling?
I feel grateful. I feel at ease. I feel supplied. I'm a little bit jet lagged, but also really optimistic about my jet lag.
Cool.
Because I've been doing all the right things. Yeah, mostly grateful.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
And one of the questions that you often get about when every time I've heard an interview of you, whether that's, and by the way, there's only 2 people I've had on the show, which I just gave up trying to consume all the content online because it's just too prolific. Noah Kagan's another one, and you're it. So I decided, instead of trying to know everything about you and ask you like, oh, take us back to the beginning and stuff.
Thank you.
What is your heart longing for right now?
Oh, wow. That's a great one. I am longing for people to wake up in a really graceful way.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, particularly this morning, I feel really... I was walking here, got off the tube. It's raining. There's a man begging. He's crippled. I've just come up from a really effectual exhibit at the Tate about climate change.
Yeah.
I'm in London to speak about hope and refuge, and therein lies my conflict every morning.
But you like
right.
paradox.
Deep. I love, well,
Yeah.
I've learned to, you have to
Right.
learn to love it or you go crazy.
Right.
So I've learned to I harness paradox. I'm so I'm more than interested. I'm devoted to non-duality. I mean, that's a lifetime job.
Beautiful. And so just actually I'm really curious because one of the things that I used to do a lot of talking before my podcast, and one of the things you might realize, like, oh, Mark, that was a bit like sudden. We just got into the interview straight away. And it's because I found that a lot of the juicy stuff I was talking to before the podcast was what I wished was on the podcast, because it's the real stuff. And it's always real, right? Hopefully the conversations. But one of the things you talked about, that you were moved by this exhibition around climate change. What moved you about it?
So it's at the Tate. It's a gentleman named Olafur Eliasson. I hope I pronounced his name right. He's most notable for a few years ago in the front of the Tate. Yeah. He brought in a few tons of ice from, I want to say, Greenland. It was like mini icebergs he brought in. And it is just like, let's just sit here and watch these melt. Yeah. Are we getting the idea? Yeah. And in this exhibit, the final departure you make is you go through a long corridor. So first you're warned that if you're going to flip out, the security guard puts this in more stoic language. If you need to leave, you can gently. And
that's not a bad accent, by the way.
Yeah, thank you. So what happens is you're waiting to go into this room. You don't know what you're going into. You enter. It's about 15 feet wide. You don't know how long you're going to be walking through it. It's bright. It's like you're in the blazing sun. It's really warm. It's there's this heavy feeling, and it's smoggy, smoky. This is the experience of climate crisis. Right. And you feel claustrophobic. My experience was anger. And part of it was we were all walking slowly through this, like sheep on their way to slaughter. I mean, such a powerful metaphor for what we're in right now. The planet is on fire, and billions of us are just taking our time. And I felt angry that people weren't making way for people on the sides to, like, I wanted to move through there much more quickly. Yeah. And then I felt angry at myself for not saying, pardon me. I want to get myself and my son out of here. Let me through.
Do you know what was going on?
It really touched me deeply.
Yeah, from a social psychologist, they call it the bystander effect. So the bystander effect effectively says that the bigger the size of the group are, the less likely you are to act if something you see, right? So it's the diffusion of responsibility. So the idea is there's an unconscious agreement that happens, which you say, I ought to do something, and I ought to do like everybody else. And so that's what happens in those kind of environments. That's why when you go into organizations and you talk about culture, a company, what have you, and people say, oh, but I saw so-and-so speak rudely to so-and-so. But did you say anything? Did you do anything? Oh, no, because nobody else did either. And then you get angry at yourself. So anyway, sorry, I don't know why I went on that rant, but on...
Well, I mean, I feel embarrassed to say that I didn't say anything in that moment. And I'm going to let myself off the hook. Yeah. You know, I'm in an art exhibition.
Yeah, and it was intentional.
It was intentional, and I am really committed to using my platform to talk about everything that I think is important to humanity. Yeah. One of the things, so here's a transparent behind the scenes. Usually what happens is I go full mode research and I look into the person, I look at the story, I go for juicy interviews, and I usually go back a little bit because often the stuff that's been said before and today, it gives you a good picture. And then I thought, actually, what do I want? How do I want to feel in this interview? Because I think that's something that I've seen you talk a lot about. Instead of what are the goals you want, think about how you want to feel. It's a radical thought for a lot of people. It's a radical kind of mind shift. What does that mean to you when you think of actually be intentional about how you feel versus intentional about what you want to achieve? I think everything that we're doing, everything we buy, where we shop, what we put into our bodies, where we work, is because we want to feel a certain way. So why don't you get conscious about what it is that you want to feel and then do whatever it morally requires to feel that way? Okay. And I think the innate drive for everybody really, really is a return to home, to God's source. And you have I think we have a universal experience from that. It's more than a sensation, from that experience, which is typically joy, love, inclusivity. Gentleness is a new one that I'm marinating. Yeah. I think gentleness is a fundamental quality of the heart. So I think ultimately the longing is a return to qualities of the heart. And that is the question, how do you want to feel?
Yeah.
Is the quickest way there.
I know.
Maybe not the quickest. I'm not into quick.
Yeah.
The surest way.
Was there a time where you made up you'd feel a certain way if you achieved a certain goal and then realized come that goal that the feeling wasn't there?
Yeah. Empty, burned out.
Yeah.
Like would hit it, fried, just tired, pissed off at the people I had to collaborate with to get there, struggle with to get there. Yeah. Or I would set a goal, not reach the goal, feel like a loser. Or I would set a goal, super exceed the goal. And still this self-critical tape would come in and say, you should have aimed higher. Like you were aiming too low because look how easy that was. So a really contentious relationship with goal setting.
Yeah. And
I still contend with it. Like I recently was in a collaboration and we were so pumped to launch what we was launching, and somebody used the term stretch goal. And I fell for it. And we all just, you talk about entrainment, right?
Yeah.
I was just in that corridor. I was like, I want a stretch goal.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
And it's super toxic for me to do that. Yeah.
That is such a tension that lives in a lot of, especially when we do like heart-centered work and we're trying to grow and do a bit of a difference and make an impact. There's this constant tension between being grateful, loving ourselves, being enough, and striving for more growth and impact. How's that dance been for you, especially over the last few years? Because I know something happened to you at the fall last year. I'm just curious, like, what's your new take on that? I
am really clear how I want to feel every day. I'm really clear that I'm here to move things forward. I have to know what my version of forward is. I mean, that's my job as a leader. It's everybody's job as a leader. Right. Everybody is teaching. Just choose what you're going to teach about. May it be on the right side of ethics and morality, so we all get where we want to go. And it's all about presence. This is just mysticism 101. Just really be here now, be in your body, keep referring to the heart. It will guide your next best step. And I'm okay with longing. Yeah.
What gets you out of being present?
Comparison, fear of the future, overzealous desire, mortal coil. Just feeling separate from source, buying into the illusion, to the lie that I am separate from source and that I have something to prove. Again, lifetime journey.
Yeah.
But that's it.
Yeah, because there's something I heard you talk about, how you grew up as a Catholic, in a Catholic kind of environment, and you kind of went away a bit from that journey, and I think you once described it as Catholic hangover, or I forgot what the words or something like that.
I'm a recovered Catholic.
Yeah, recovered, that's it. And that, but you're now becoming unapologetic, and this is a word that's come up a lot, and actually I wrote it down in my notes. Unapologetic seems to be something about you which I find compelling. Right, I can't speak on anybody else's behalf, but there's something about you which is unapologetic and learning. And I'm sure there's still things that you're kind of feeling, apologetic for. And yet God's come up, your God or concept of God has come up, and you've come home almost to this, I've now got it. What's the got it?
The got it is my own acceptance of my pain, my suffering, my fear, my terror, my shame, my own humanness. And for me, the experience of being in that with a lack of judgment is transformational. Yeah. And you cross this threshold of, it's not even a question of your deserving or of your worth. Of course, you still struggle with it on a daily basis. But yeah, it's that sense of home that I was talking about earlier.
I love that. Yeah. I love that. And there's a part of this podcast, and I would get killed if I didn't ask you about your story and a bit of your background, because people love soulful stories. And what I learned, I guess what I kind of soaked in from hearing about you is that, you know, you grew up feeling a little bit like an outsider in Canada, in your hometown, in Ontario, I think it was. And you would rather look at the September Vogue edition magazine than going and farming. And yet in that, you found also comfort in space, I guess, and in loneliness. And there's this term that I often say that people mistype you or confuse you for an extrovert, and that you're an opinionated introvert. How do you manage? And this is a question from my partner Julie, who considers herself an introvert. She asked Danielle this question, and she said, "How do you manage your energy when it comes down to, as an introvert, putting yourself out there on social media and talking about what you do and showing up and speaking like you're doing on Monday? Like, how do you manage that energy?"
Well, I don't feel drained after a gig. I don't feel drained from engagement because we're having a meaningful, purposeful conversation. I'm really interested in connection, in communion. I mean, I'm here for love. Yeah. And I have lots of simplicity and lots of wellness in my life. Like, I know that my favorite thing is like zero inbox. It's not a goal in my life. By the way, we should not be measuring the quality of our lives by zero inbox, because you're still the fool. It's still the inbox controlling you. But I know that, you know, I just need spaciousness and yoga and eat clean. And I live really contemplatively in a way, in a great degree, considering urban, mother, friend, professional. I just want genuine connection. It's the small talk that's draining. So I just don't do much of that.
Oh, what's the weather like? Like, what are you thinking about?
Yeah. And even in those moments, I really try to go into this space of like, wow, there's some oneness happening here. Someone's trying, we're trying to connect. There's an attempt. Yeah.
I get that. It's interesting, because one of the things, I think one of the side effects of this journey, what do we call it, personal growth, personal development, is that eventually you really crave deep, meaningful conversation, especially in my context of these kind of conversations that we're broadcasting. And so then when I'm with friends or old friends and we're chatting, I'm just going, this is quite superficial. There's still quite layers. There are layers that are, and I love what you're saying. It's almost like, be curious. There's an attempt to connect, and there's maybe just layers that we need to work through to get to the actual.
And isn't it? It's so painful not getting through those layers. Especially in the context of your friends, you know you're there to connect. I found, I was at a dinner party a couple weeks ago. These are all people who, are promoting self-help. And I just didn't feel like we were getting there yet. We got there, but it feels so, that missed opportunity for connections.
I get that.
It's painful, I
get that. I heard you say once that you used to have a bob haircut, wear black suits and loafers.
And smoke Marlboros,
You smoke
Oh my God, I still love a Marlboro.
Yeah. And just before this interview, you asked me a question, and I told you, and I said, I never thought I'd say this out loud, right? Like, are you surprised? Like, would the Danielle working at a think tank in Washington recognize the Danielle that you are?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because even though I was wearing loafers and a severe black suit, I was going home and reading Rumi and A Course in Miracles, and my relationship to spirit has always been alive. I mean, it's much deeper now. But.
So what's different now than it was then?
Oh, what's different now? So much. I mean, I feel deeply well. I'm much more gentle than I used to be, and that. That's part of my fascination with gentleness is my own journey. But I really think, and the more I've read about dark nights of the soul and different mythologies, it really is the fruit of so many spiritual paths. I mean, I think there's only one spiritual path and infinite ways to walk it.
Yeah.
The ideal would be that on your search, your ego is starting to dissolve somewhat. Or you're better at consciously tending to managing your ego. And I think one of the results of that is you become softer. You're less defended. You are, for me, way less arrogant. When you move closer to what gives you life, what's life affirming for you, when you really commit to showing up as love, way less to prove. So much less brittle.
Yeah.
I don't need to be as right.
Right. There's something interesting. You talked about ego, and I have an opinion about using the word ego,
I
right?
would love to hear.
Yeah, and I love actually to bounce with you on this. Is that I find that ego is often used as a term which is connotation with negative, and having an ego is bad.
Yeah.
I don't hold that belief. I think ego is the awareness of self, and that there is what I would call a reactive ego and a creative ego. And I'm just curious to hear, do you feel that it's about these kind of different sides of ego? Like you can have an ego which can be, Danielle, look how amazing you are, and you should be striving for more, and look at me in comparison and all that stuff. But can ego also be something positive?
I think we all have a persona.
Yeah.
For most of us, unless you're going to really commit to being a monk, most of us are going to have that persona until we die. You need to have a persona to navigate. The trick, the gift, the invitation is to have a persona that is so closely as closely as possible resembling your spirit, your soul, your heart. I think there's there's a shadow side to every persona, right? To the ego. I think the ego at its worst is it just wants to separate. It's the opposite of source.
Okay.
It's the opposite of feeling home. And when it's rabid and unchecked, it is constantly looking for
validation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it will validate itself at the expense of other. And right now that's really the definition of politics.
It's like an autoimmune disease, almost, that ego.
That's a great metaphor.
Yeah.
It kills the host.
Yeah.
It wants to, and it's so threatened by love.
Wow. Yeah. And being seen.
Yeah.
Because you can't, if you can't survive too long under the light.
Yeah. And and ultimately what self-love is having you proclaim and be a stand for is that I am lovable no matter what. And
shadow and all.
Wow. Yeah, that takes such courage.
Yeah. I think that's one thing that I've struggled the most with. The last few months, I want to say the last year, what I've kind of been exploring is the aspect of shadow. This idea of how I've labeled some parts of me as good, as healthy, as conscious, as grounded, and other parts of me as reactive, bad, naughty, whatever you want to say it, whether that's in sex, whether that's in relationship, whether that's in business or what have you. And, and I've talked about this before, and it's like I've been in therapy now for about, so since I became a dad, I decided that I was going to get my shit sorted out, basically.
Yeah, it's great motivation.
Yeah, and so I went to therapy, and what I learned from that, the biggest thing I'm taking away is how hard it is to wholeheartedly accept and love myself unconditionally.
Can we talk about shadow?
Yeah, please. Okay. Love to.
This has really been my most intense journey over the last 18 months. So I would say for the last decade, every therapeutic situation I've been in, psychotherapists, energy workers, they've all said, let's do some inner child work. I've been hugely resistant to that. I'm like, I am a grown woman. I can do whatever I want. And then became a mother.
Yeah.
It seemed even more ridiculous to do inner child work. But just like you, there was a new degree of commitment. It's like, if I'm really going to guide this boy to show up as he is, and I have an agenda, I want him to be his most creative, effulgent, beautiful self. And my sub-agenda is make a difference while you're on the planet.
Yeah.
I'm going to brainwash you into making a social contribution. And I'm so down with that. I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
If I'm going to do all of that, I better be in absolute integrity with myself. The shadow work for me, the inner child work, has been lots of things to notice there, but one of the greatest ahas was I realized that my conversation with higher power, whatever you want to call it, for me, God, was transactional. And that even in...
Not unconditional.
It was still performance-based.
And
that when I wanted to show up as my best for God.
Yeah.
That's actually highly problematic.
Yeah. Because if you show, well, because what's the feeling you're chasing? If we go back to your work, if you show up as your best self for God,
then I get what I want.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was trying to be my most positive. So new age, right? Positive think. I'd love to talk about that.
Yeah, please.
Trying to be my most grateful.
Yeah.
My most diligent, my most devoted.
Yeah.
And if you can't be your full, broken, shameful self with creation, where can you turn? And it just adds to the sense of isolation and loneliness.
Yeah. Love that. Love that. That's because there's a sense of, if I can't be real and open and whole with you, then who can I be with?
Yeah.
Especially if I can't be with myself.
Yes.
In times of needs.
Yes.
So positive thinking. Positive.
Oh, fuck it.
Amen, sister.
I think there's shallow positive thinking and there's deep positive thinking.
Okay.
Shallow positive thinking has you use positive think, let's call it, for two reasons. One, to manipulate reality, to manifest, get what you want by being positive. How's that working for everybody? Yeah. I can tell you it's not working. I've had this conversation with thousands of people about manifestation and desire. Doesn't work. Yeah. It has you deny your humanity. If you deny your humanity, your weaknesses, shame, etc., you will never access your strength. Ever. You will never be a full-bodied individual. You're missing out. You're missing out on the real juice. Because underneath the shame, the terror, the vulnerability, wow, you realize you're immense.
It's so scary though, Danielle.
It's so scary.
Even I'm noticing in my body because, I know. I know.
Wow, you realize infinite,
Yeah.
golden,
Yeah.
all the resources you need are there. You're going to lose sight of this. You're going to forget about it. You'll have doubts about this, possibly, probably, hourly. But you tap it. It's, I forget who wrote the poem, to see the face of God. You just, you can't go backwards after you've seen the light of yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. And was that amplified for you after what happened in the fall of 2018? When you woke up, and because I know you've spoken about this a little bit, but you went through a tough time, and you
really
went through like one of your hardest, challenging time you talked about.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Let me explain the hard, challenging time.
Yeah.
And the reason I talk about this is because I'm really now in this choiceless space of, I've always talked about what's going on in my life. My policy has always been talk about pain after you've processed the pain for a couple of reasons. One, you really, when you're in those hyper vulnerable states, when you're in crises, the last thing you need is everybody's projections on you about why you're there and about how to get out of it.
Okay.
I actually don't need your prayers when I'm in it.
Yeah.
I just need the guidance and the prayers of my inner circle. Yeah. Secondly, I'm really into word economy and not wasting anybody's time. So
love that expression, word economy.
One of my ways of being of service is to sort my stuff out first and then package it and deliver it to be of service.
Yeah.
Okay, so where I found myself last fall was, I thought numerous times in my life I'd been through a dark night of the soul. Yeah. Divorce will do that to you. Yeah. Miscarriage might get you there. Lots of other reasons.
Getting fired from your own company.
Getting fired from my own company. I got Steve Jobs. That was no fun. And then you're in it and you go, this is it.
Yeah.
This is what they speak of. Yeah. And the punctuated moment of that was, and let me give you just a little more context. But prior to this, I would say I had zero experience with anxiety. Very little experience with depression, deep sadness, sorrow, agony, for sure, like profound suffering in my life, but would never say, not a depressive personality. Really never had no judgment against
people
what I would call head meds.
Yeah.
No judgment at all, just never something I needed in my life. And there I was in the emergency ward at a hospital in Vancouver, begging for anti-anxiety meds. I had no idea what was going on. Always have had psychotherapy happening in my life. And my psychotherapist, I mean, this was a long unfolding, unpacking, falling apart. It said, Danielle, you're having panic attacks.
Yeah.
I was like, what? I'm having panic attacks. What? Very much introvert, love my solitude and alone time, as we talked about. Couldn't be left alone. Would call my friends and ask who was going to babysit me that day.
Yeah. Can I go and work with you? Can I spend some time with you?
I just sit and also even in that request, the lack of just the brokenness. I remember saying to a friend, I'll just sit in the corner. Constant crying, waking up with suicidal thoughts. Wasn't suicidal, but wow, I was getting ready,
and that was something
to
new for
cook
you.
up a plan. So new for me. Never, ever. I mean, I've lived most of my life very, very driven, which is part of what led to that crash. But also, I'm a lover, and I'm a devotee of something higher. I've never questioned why I'm here. And there I was questioning all of it.
Yeah.
And the plan I was toying with was I would get my son set up in life. I'd get him on his way. And then if I was still suffering to this degree, if I was still in such profound agony, I couldn't go on like that.
Yeah. Is that had to do with when you realized that there was a deep pain in your heart that no one else but yourself could solve? Yeah,
that was part of it. That was one of the revelations.
Yeah.
That, well, there was someone else who could solve it, was just to give it up to life.
Yeah.
And I needed to feel worthy of giving up that pain.
Yeah.
And then I also needed, there were some layers of complexity. And I needed to feel trusting of a higher power to transform it, transmute it, turn it around. Yeah.
So that's a question actually that's really interesting, because the work that you put out, and I definitely want to spend a bit of time talking about the desire map, and it's this idea that it's how intentionally how you want to feel, and yet you're in this situation where you don't know what's happening. Like you're there, you're in an emergency, asking for anti-anxiety. In those moments, do you think you can still apply the work around the core desired feeling, or in that moment is it, hey, come back to being resourceful and then we can work around CD? But right now, you need to take care of yourself.
It's a great question. I mean, really, does desire mapping work in moments of extreme crisis? A little bit. Yeah. And a little bit counts in moments of extreme crisis. I mean, it's very clear. This is not how I want to feel. What's the opposite of anxiety? Home, safety, whatever it is. Yeah. We should talk about how I got out of that.
Yeah, please.
How I got through that.
Yeah, please.
So I refer to that time in my life as my living death.
Yeah, I've heard you say that.
That's a phrase from my psychologist, from Anne Davin. But I really felt I was being dismantled. I went hardcore on the inner child work. And there were days where I had to orient my whole life around the wound. And
the wound or the wounds?
The multiple.
Yeah.
And I had to treat myself like I was about 4 years old. Every day, what are 5 things that are going to give me joy today? They were so simple. A nap, texting so-and-so and so-and-so, a warm bath, and I'm going to lay on the floor. Wow. I still have a list of 5 things now. Like, it's not so surprising that the things that get you through crisis are the same things that help you build a life that is nourishing and well and vibrant. And I think that's one of the reasons we go through crisis, because we're going to excavate those tools. The tools end up being really primal and really divine at the same time. My girlfriends have always been my religion. I think I would have probably committed myself if I didn't have strong friendships. For anybody who's listening, who is in this dark place, do not isolate. It's the first thing you want to do, because there's shame involved, because you feel crazy, like no one even has
and you
the
don't know how to
vocabulary.
express it. You don't know how to actually express what you're feeling, and therefore it's like, well, if I can't explain it myself, why am I going to burden someone else with it?
Yeah, you feel like a burden.
Yeah.
And you also, you have this fear that you're going to be misunderstood, and that misunderstanding is going to cause more
Chaos.
division and pain. It ends up so many people understand.
Sure.
And one of the just infinite benefits of being on the other side. But when I talk about this now, especially in speaking gigs, I mean, people used to come up to me after a gig and talk to me about suicide and depression and anxiety. I could only be sympathetic. I couldn't be empathetic. Couldn't relate. I just like all the love and compassion I had.
Sure.
Now I get it. Now I'm really committed to talking about it because it's an epidemic.
Sure.
And let's talk about the reasons that got me there.
Please.
At the bedrock of it, the illusion of lack of self-worth. I think that's mortal coil. I don't care how successful you are, how evolved you are, how many hours you've logged in lotus position. If you are in this vehicle called a human body, you are struggling with issues of self-worth to some degree, because you have an ego, and the ego wants you divided from God, the out-of-control ego. So very driven. I think I had a low degree of anxiety my whole life that I managed impeccably. And I managed it by becoming an overachiever. I managed it with a lot of bravado. I managed it. I was constantly working. Even if I wasn't working, I was thinking about working. And I was able to frame a lot of this as being of service.
Yes.
It's such a new age fucked up twist.
Yeah, because it's like, but it's worth it. I'm putting myself through this pain. It's almost the martyr.
Yes.
You know, the kind of like
that's martyr for all
martyr,
the North Americans listening,
or the non-dyslexics in the world who can't pronounce the word. Right. It's kind of like I get something out of it.
Oh yeah. There's a double gain.
Sure.
Yeah.
100%. I've just noticed at the time we've only got a few minutes left, and I feel like, oh my gosh.
We should just go over time. I've come all this way.
Okay, cool. Okay. So, because one of the things that I heard also talk about is there was a literal experience of you going in cold water.
Oh yeah.
Like almost kind of, because you're all about warmth.
Yeah.
You don't do cold water.
Yeah, I don't do cold.
But you were there, after a shamanic experience with this, I think, psychotherapist, I want to say, and you went by the river, and then on your own. You went in the water.
Yeah. Well, it was a shamanic experience, as one has with their psychotherapist in New Mexico. There was no peyote or ayahuasca involved.
Okay.
That's a whole other conversation.
Yeah.
Those aren't my choices in my life. And I'd come out, I was not okay. It was really the beginning of the dismantling for me.
Okay.
And my shrink saw me, and I just looked at her like, I don't know, something. I didn't have words. We went down to the river. Beautiful, beautiful scene. I mean, it was just like this oasis that's been carved out by a giant. And I was just sobbing on this rock. She put her hand on my back as women know how to do with other women. Yeah, I don't want to exclude anybody from this, but And then she knew when I was ready to be alone, and I disrobed, and I just thought, I think I'm going to baptize myself. I don't know what's going to happen here. And was the moment where I just thought, the only place to put this pain is in God's hands. And I just need to be rid of it, or I'm going to die. And I begged to have it taken from me. And I had to choose to be worthy of begging. And I had to choose, I couldn't not be ashamed of begging, but I had to choose to be okay with being ashamed. And that was the transmutation.
Yeah, I get that.
To just say, I'm all these scared things. I'm going to have to be okay with that today.
Yeah. I don't know why it reminds me of Brené Brown came to London. I asked her a question. I said, why is it so hard to receive? Why is it so easy to give, to provide, to support, and yet so hard to ask for what I want and receive? And she said, she kind of laughed, she made a joke about it, but then, in fact, she said something along the lines of, it's very difficult to receive if you have an armor on. You have to take your armor off. And there's something in that story when you're telling me, there's like the surrendering and being okay with the shame of having to ask for help, which really kind of resonates with me. So thanks for sharing that.
Oh, yeah. My pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you for asking.
And again, when I look at your story, there seems to be these cycles of, in Joseph Campbell, I know you like Joseph Campbell, and we kind of got that in common. The hero's journey. You've gone through many multiple wheels of the hero's journey of Joseph Campbell's work on hero's journey, and one of them, and I'm just curious because I haven't heard too much about it, but there was a time in your life where you went through the whole think tank, a security clearance at the Pentagon level 1 and all that stuff. And there's a story, by the way, if anybody hasn't listened to some of your content, I loved it, is how you were getting the newspaper every day and you realized that you didn't really care about the news, but the pop culture stuff was really more interesting. And that's when you kind of realized that there's a problem.
Yeah, like we were having conversations about weapons of mass destruction. Yeah. And I just I really just want to read Rolling Stone right now. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you started an agency with Soul. This kind of, creative agency. You had a partner and you got lots of media attention. And I don't know exactly chronologically how this happened because I've heard different kind of versions of it. But what I've seemed to understand is that you got a lot of press about it. Maybe you raised some money around it, or there was money going back. And the more money you raised, the quieter you became.
I remember the day that I had to give away signing authority on the corporate bank account because we'd hired a CEO.
Yeah.
And I had to form, by law, an advisory board.
Okay.
And I was raging inside, like, this is so wrong. This is my business. It's so-and-so and Danielle.com.
Yeah.
Why am I doing this? Because that was the council.
Yeah.
And I just became silent.
Yeah.
And it was my demise.
Yeah.
Which was my liberation, which is how it works. That's a cycle.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, what I'm really interested in, I want to go back to Joseph Campbell.
Yeah, please.
I'm interested, everybody, pop culture is so familiar with him talking about following your bliss. There's something that's missed, is that whole quote is that the hero enters the landscape in the darkest part.
Yeah.
And the landscape becomes fluidly ambiguous. You do not know where you are.
100%.
There is nothing to hold on to. There is nothing familiar. Your identity will start to dissolve. Your friends will necessarily start to change. It's going to look very different. There's that. It's there's the time in the cocoon where the caterpillar becomes soup. You are unrecognizable. Also, Joseph talks about this dimension, Earth, being a wasteland. And we're so into the charm of his philosophy around bliss, we don't see the harder truth of his philosophy, which is
the cost of bliss, of transformation.
I don't know if it's so much the cost of bliss, but let's just wake up and see the degree of density that we're walking in down here. And then the choice is to see that and then to choose bliss and to commit your work to helping people make choices that lead to bliss.
Yeah.
But first you need to see the wasteland. It's like we're not going to heal the climate crisis until we see until we're really sobered by this. So my devotion right now, and this is, this brings us to the top of this conversation, is to tend to the agony. To see. I am committed. I will not look away. And I will not give up hope. And then I will use everything I've got to foster hope. Because what else am I going to do? Yeah. I mean, what am I going to do here? Shop? Yeah.
And what's the agony that you're seeing or sensing the most right now?
Well, I'm having a hard time breathing. There's that. There is, already we've started to see massive population dislocation. Yeah. Because of climate change. We're creating climate refugees. Isn't
it crazy that president of the United States to this day denies climate change. I mean, I don't know what it's like in Canada, what the kind of all the opinions that are happening, but at least for a certain group of people around here, when we hear this, it's just going, it's mad. Like it's.
Well, these are the hot words that we need to take really seriously.
Yeah.
Crazy, madness. This is insanity, and we're justifying insanity. We're denying. So what is sane? And then let's create policy and do everything we can to move towards sane. And sane right now looks insane to the current structures. But sane is idealism. Sane is morality. Sane is ethical. Sane is love. Love is the greatest sanity there is. Dissolves all illusion.
Yeah. And your friend, and I don't know if I want to say your friends, but at least I know that or I've been following Marianne Williamson for about 20 years now.
Very much support what she's doing.
And she is a presidential candidate for 2020.
She is. I was just watching her this morning before I got on the tube to come here. She's having a highly engaged conversation with Anderson Cooper, CNN, USA, talking about love and politics. Even with Anderson, who's someone whose journalism I respect, there's still, it's as if journalists feel honor bound to be cynical.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because it's really interesting. Some of my teammates, they'll laugh when they hear this, but my teammates are mostly in America, and I don't know a lot about US politics, but I do follow a little bit the debates. I like to watch interviews and stuff, so I almost know a bit more than they do. And one of the things that I was a bit surprised by, and this is a bigger topic about dehumanization, and when I find that quite scary that we have to dehumanize our opposition, and this goes both ways, right? Whether it's someone I don't believe like Donald Trump or someone like Nigel Farage in the UK, I think calling them names and dehumanizing them is probably the least thing they need right now, because they've probably got enough shame as it is, but that's another conversation. But when I look at the debate that is going on, and then you see journalists, even Democratic kind of TV hosts, they summarize, I forgot the name now, it's not Jimmy Kimmel, but it's they summarize the debate. When Marianne Williamson comes in the conversation, it becomes a joke. It becomes the kind of like what they're using, almost the woohoo author, and I don't know if that's kind of what you felt is happening. And there's two candidates that I've been looking at closely, Marianne Williamson and Andrew Yang. And when you look at the second Democratic election debate that happened, both of them allegedly had their microphones cut off and had less than 3 minutes to talk about issues, and I don't know even going with that question. It was more like a thought.
Well, it's a denial that we're in a crisis of morality.
Yeah.
And I think Marianne is one of the sanest voices on that platform. Yeah,
that's cool. Okay, last few questions. One of them is, again, I'll be jabbed if I don't ask this question. So you had brunch with Oprah, and something about Oprah Super Soul 100.
Yeah.
What does that mean to you?
It's very sweet. Yeah. It feels definitely an honor. Definitely. Who doesn't want to have brunch with Oprah? She looked amazing. Yeah. She's warm. She's beautiful. Yeah. Stedman just came in as Adidas tracksuit. Yeah. He's like there for
the food.
There for the food. And it doesn't define me. So like total gratitude. Yeah. And those things are very curated. There's 100,000 people that deserve to be on that list. Yeah.
Got that. One of the things I want to hit on, because I know this is what I want people to get away from this conversation with you, because if I could spend another hour, there'd be three things I'd talk. But one of them is being unapologetic about being successful. I really want to get into that, because I think that is something I struggle with. It's something I see so many people around me struggle with. And there's something about you, and maybe I make this up, maybe I'm totally making a false assumption here, but there's something about you that tells me that you are unapologetic about your success. I could be totally wrong.
Well, first we have to define success.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So my version of success for myself is that I have a lot of freedom in my life. Yeah. And I have, there's freedom of speech. There's freedom around how I spend my time, who I give to, how I give. I'm unrestrained mostly in my self-expression. That's my definition of freedom, of success. Now there's material success. I'm not apologetic of that, I'm very conscious of that. I'm conscious of how I created it. I'm conscious of how I'm able to care for other people, of my own little mini economy that I have that's called a business. I'm very conscious of the people who do not have it, who are striving in the same industry. And I also look at, I'm very sensitive to overconsumption and materialism. And so that plays into my perspective of success.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. And so knowing that that's your definition of success, and for people listening who make up their own definition of success, what are some, what's a juicy tip or something that you'd want to share with them about how to own that and how to be okay with that, how to be at peace? Because maybe unapologetic might be a bit overstatement for some people right now. Or maybe it's not. But how would you, what would be a tip you could give to someone to actually be okay with what you desire and be okay with what you have?
Well, to be sure that you're defining success on your own terms, that you're really clear of your definition of it. To celebrate it. I mean, but without, I don't know, there's a layer. It's like I'm conflating the definition of material success and inner success. Just share your joy. Why would you keep, this is very biblical, but why would you keep your light under a bushel? Right? Is like, share your joy. Do not be modest about your happiness.
Yeah.
But at the same time, when you're in that place, when you're experiencing joy, there is a sensitivity, there is a gentleness you will walk with through the world. And you will want to do what you can to uplift other people and to say, it's possible. Or, I believe that this is available for everybody. But again, we need to keep to keep pulling out the strands of what exactly is possible for everybody. Because you can stay on that emotional track and say, everybody can be happy, everybody can find joy. It's not about money, it's not about whatever. You have to be really mindful about where you bring that conversation and the energy, because there are a lot of people in extreme suffering. How can you say that to someone who's in mental illness anguish? You can just say, maybe we can alleviate some of your suffering today. And it's just that. It's just it's the one thing you hold on to in the crisis of darkness. Maybe you can say to that person, I believe in your original self. I believe that you're an original blessing. Maybe you can't believe it for yourself, but I'm going to hold that truth for you today. Yeah.
There's a saying in that was taught in the school I was trained with in coaching school. We hold you naturally, creative, resourceful, and whole. Yeah. And that's how we approach every conversation and every human, whether you're in a state of recognizing it or not. But I will hold you naturally, creative, resourceful, and whole. That's the belief. And if you go from that perspective, from that cornerstone, it just changes the dynamic of how you approach someone and how you alleviate them. Yeah, that's cool.
I want to say one more thing about success. I know we were supposed to wrap.
Because I'm conscious of you, because I know you've got much. You've got lots of.
I'm just going shopping for guitars after this. I do want to say something about success and responsibility.
Okay.
So I don't want anybody to be ashamed of their success, guilty for their success, or to repress it in any way. However, there are a lot of people on the planet right now who have more than others in terms of material success. And we need to really take a conscious look at that. So maybe not guilt, but,
mindful.
Conscience.
Yeah.
Conscience.
Yeah.
Share your stuff. Do you need that much stuff?
Yeah.
Because your stuff is costing all of us.
That. One of the last topics I want to touch is the being true. I heard, I think you say that being real is magnetic.
Yeah.
Were you always real?
I think everybody's as real as they possibly can
at
be
that
in that
given
moment.
point. Yeah. I like that. Yeah, because one of the things is, I know people listening to this, and this is something I've been trying to talk about, like being yourself is good for business, it's good for your soul, it's good for your relationships. And yet so many people struggle with that, of the metaphor that I love using and that I was taught, I can't take credit for this, is that as kids we have full range of emotions. And if you look at a piano, I think there's 88 keys on a piano. We have full range. I mean, you've got a son, I've got a daughter. You know, when they're kids, when they're happy, they laugh. When they are unhappy, they cry. When they want something, they ask. You know, it's full range. And then as we go through life, a little bit of education, a little bit of family, a little bit of relationships, a little bit of work, and suddenly we just play on a little part of a piano, you know? Yeah. And one of the works that I'm trying to do through this conversation with you and through this podcast is to expand that range and that people can start playing and get a little bit larger on their piano. What would be something that you'd want to part with or give to people listening about just expanding that a little bit more and allowing the world to experience you for who you are?
Well, I can tell you that everything you want is on the other side of that range. But also the question, the lever is, how do you want to feel? Yeah. And then that's all I can give you. That's all any self-help preacher can give you. How do you want to feel? That's the gate. That's the gateway drug to fulfillment. Then you have to do what it takes to feel that way. And that's the beauty of free will.
Yeah, now you feel. Before we wrap up the interview, I want to say a genuine, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for coming on the show. I know that it was a total coincidence that I know that when we emailed each other, you said, and I said, oh, if you happen to be in London.
I did.
And you were like, I'm coming in. That'd be cool. And I know that it's, it's a genuine gift for me and for people listening to get to hear your soul, your heart, and your story. So thank you for your generosity. And thank you for being someone who is exactly how I imagined you to be from experiencing. And that, I think, is, if I could say one of my life missions, is that people experience me on the street, in an audience, on a podcast, or through my work, the exact same person. And you are that same person that I exactly expected. So thank you for being real. Thank you for being the same person as you are online as you are in person. And thank you for the hug that you gave when we met.
Oh, yeah. There's another hug in store.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for being so kind and loving.
Oh, of course. What's one thing that most people don't know about you?
I don't drink coffee. I've never had a sip of coffee ever.
I'm going to high five to that. Me neither.
Really?
Yeah. Swear to God. Yeah.
Why have you never had a sip of coffee?
Yeah, it's a rare thing to meet someone else who doesn't drink coffee. So for me personally, I remember car rides as a kid, being in the car with my mum and my dad and my brother, driving down to my grandmother's house, and my mum opening up a flask of coffee in the car, and me hating the smell to the point. So it's probably a mix of car sick and coffee. And so I always despised the smell. And then as I grew up, everybody around me was obsessed with coffee, and I just didn't care about it. And today, like my partner, Julie, who's very excited to come on Monday, by the way.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, she's very, very excited. I told her last night it was a surprise. Anyway, they live for the moment they drink their first cup of coffee like zombies. And I'm like, that is a drug. Like, I'm pretty sure that if that was
a drug.
Yeah. So why don't you drink coffee?
Never appealed to me. I love the smell. It's just never, I don't want to have coffee breath. Yeah, that's my thing. No coffee, no mushrooms, no onions.
Yeah. Oh, really? No mushrooms, no onions?
Yeah.
I did not know that.
How about you?
I'm cool with that. Yeah, I'm cool with that.
Well, you're French.
Yeah. Well, you're French-Canadian, right?
Yeah, but it's different.
What does being unconventional mean to you?
Sane. Being unconventional. Yeah, sane. Owning my time, owning my body, owning my voice. Unfortunately. Yeah. It is currently unconventional.
I love that.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you've been to Piccadilly Circus yet in London. So it's basically like the I want to say the Times Square of New York almost. Yes. There's like a big TDK kind of, just that's some free advertising right there, on a digital board. And if I could give you that screen for a day, and you could write a sentence on that screen, and everybody walking by would see it, what would you want that sentence to read?
Oh. So many things. Love. Be in love with love. It's the best relationship.
I love that. Where can people find you most online? Where do you hang out the most?
At Danielle LaPorte. Instagram is the center of my digital universe. I love it there.
And then they can find your website from there.
DanielleLaPorte.com.
Got it. And you've got a course, I think, coming out. I don't know if it's out already.
I have a beautiful course called Desire Map.
Yeah.
And I'm launching, guess what? A podcast.
Yeah, you are.
Is coming out in August of this year, August of 2019. Okay. I've been very resistant. I'm going to do it.
Okay, well, when it's out, let me know and I'll add it to the show notes of this.
Cool.
Listen, you'd be a fool not to have a podcast, and I'll tell you why.
Why?
You have the most amazing voice ever. You've got an amazing message, an amazing energy, and people are dying to hear more truth in this world. And
I agree that people are dying to hear more truth.
Yeah, 100%. Danielle, thank you so much.
Mark,
genuine pleasure.
Thank you.
And I can't wait to see you talk on Monday and see you do your magic.
I will be there in my high heels.
All right, folks, thank you so much for listening to the show. I hope you enjoyed that powerful conversation. It's one of those where I could have spent another 2 hours, honestly, speaking with Danielle. But what I took most about Danielle is just this ability to be both real and intentional, and both want to make a difference and also loving yourself at the same time. That's not cool. So as always, you can go and check out Danielle on Instagram, Danielle LaPorte. Make sure to get yourself a copy of the Desire Map, White Hot Truth, 5-star session. But if you want to feel with your goals, with soul, here's the book. And as always, thank you so much for listening. I love you, and I'll see you next time. Hey, it's me again. I hope you enjoyed that conversation. I know I did. I promised you a story. Here's the story. One of the things that I often find fascinating in this world that we're in, right, of like growth and leadership and courage and entrepreneurship, is that there are certain people who you might look up to, you might be inspired by, you might want to follow in some way, and then you meet them. And when you meet them, it can sometimes be disappointing. It's happened to me where I've met people in person and they're totally not the person I thought they'd be, and it's my fault for having certain expectations and so forth. But Danielle's the opposite. And I've got a really funny story I want to share with you. And that is, so Danielle invited me and my partner to go and see her talk at this amazing venue in London. And we get to the front of the queue, and there's this massive queue, right, to get in. And people are coming by asking people to get the tickets out. And I say, hey, I'm on Danielle's list. I say, oh, just go at the front of the queue. There's someone with a list, and they'll let you in. And so I joked to my partner saying, oh, imagine if Danielle forgot to put us on the list, so there's a problem and we're not on the list, and that's going to be super awkward because we've got a babysitter. And I've told my partner, like, hey, I've got this really special kind of night out. And we get to the front of the queue, and lo and behold, my name's not on the list. And so I look for the email where Danielle's basically said, hey, really excited to see you tonight, obviously. So I show her the email, and she goes, okay, I can see that, Danielle's invited. So, go at the front. If you find some seats, great, but I don't know if there's any seats left. And everybody who's like a VIP or on the list had a gold bracelet, right? Had like a gold kind of bracelet. Everybody else was kind of a silver one. We didn't even have a bracelet. So my partner and I walk right to the front, and keep in mind that my partner is pregnant. So something that this might be the first time I mentioned it on this podcast, but my partner is pregnant again, and so we're walking towards the front of the room, and there's these rows of seats, and there's like a couple of seats pretty close, and we start approaching it, and this man, well-intended man, comes to me and says, sorry, no, you can't sit there, only it's all reserved as VIP. He's like, oh, well, I'm on Danielle's list. It's like, no, you don't have the gold bracelet, you can't sit there. I'm like, it's going to be all right, mate. Don't worry about it. Like, don't stress out. There's plenty of room. My partner's pregnant. We need to sit down. So I sit down. So we're sitting there, and I think the guy's probably huffing and puffing in some sort of way. But we're like literally 2 rows in, right, at the front. And so looking around, it's buzzing in the room. It's kind of a church place, very famous for all the big speakers come and speak there. And on the corner of my eye, I see that Danielle is approaching the room, and everybody's kind of excited. And you know what she does? She clocks me and she goes, Mark, and she comes towards me and gives me a big hug and gives a big hug to Julie. She's all mic'd up. And the guy who sees me kind of feels really sorry because he's kind of like, oh, and we were joking before, like, we don't even need gold bracelets. And the reason I'm sharing this story is that not only did Danielle do that and show it that kind of moment, took the time to come and give me a hug and make us feel welcome, but during her talk, she actually mentioned the Unconventionalists podcast. She plugged it in. She may have mispronounced the word. It's like, the uncommoners. Oh no, the Unconventionalists. And everybody laughed. But she dropped the podcast, and that's the kind of person who she is. And that's why I wanted to share this story with you, because not only did you see the episode where I sat down with her and spoke with her, but that's how she is outside too. So if you want to go and check out her podcast, you can go and do that. It's out now. It's been out since the 25th of August. Brand new. It's available on iTunes, wherever you get your podcasts. And one last time, if you want to launch your own podcast, come and join me on the 20th of September, 2019, so that you can meet your heroes, the people who inspire you, who move you in some way, and you can create that show from scratch with me. Show descriptions below will have the link, and you can get 10% by using Podcast Tribe, all lowercase. That's it. I hope that was a cool story. I love that story. Danielle, if you're still watching to the end of the episode, I love you and appreciate you. Thank you for coming on the show, and all the best on the launch of your new podcast. I'll see you soon.